We live? All right, everybody sit down. We're going to get started. I'm live, which means you're live. All right, well, let's get going. We're going to be in 2 Corinthians. I want to welcome our folks that are joining us live on Facebook. So glad that you are joining us tonight. We just switched over to Break Free. We do Celebrate Recovery before we do Break Free. So I've already taught a lesson in Celebrate Recovery. Now we're switching gears, and we're going to talk about the issue of breaking free from the things that we deal with and the hurts and the struggles that all of us have. We're in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And I'm just going to continue to process and walk through it. Tonight I really want to deal with this understanding of shame. Shame is such a big issue. Shame is such a major contributor to how we handle ourselves. Not only how we perceive ourselves, but how we perceive others. When we have a perception through the lens of shame, that's not just a perception of how I view me, but it's also can become a perception of how I view you and how I view you viewing me, if you really want to get down to it. Shame is one of those things that most of us have felt shame before. Most of us have, I'm sure some of y'all have dealt with shame before, right? You ever been ashamed of yourself? We grow up in the South, so somebody might even say to you, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, right? Some of y'all have even taught your pets to be ashamed. When I was growing up, I had a dog, and I'm telling you, my mother could get on that dog, and she'd say, you get upstairs. And that dog would just go up to the top of the steps and lay its head out over the first step, acting like it was about to jump at any moment. It was so ashamed. You know what I mean? Shame is an interesting feeling. So I want to talk to you about it, because if we're ever going to break free and become what God wants us to be, we can't walk under the cloud of shame our whole life. We live in a day and time where people want to make you feel the shame that is associated with your life all the time. There's people that won't ever let you forget what you've done. We live in a day and time where people could post anything, say anything, do anything, because they don't want you to ever forget the decision that you made, the action that you took, whatever it was. And so we pile on at different times, and sometimes it becomes so heavy for people. How long does someone need to be punished? And how long do we need to remind somebody? Sometimes it comes from the people that are closest to us, that know us the best, that remind us. They say things sometimes sarcastically or off the cuff, and it begins to hurt us. So how do we deal with shame? Well, let's look at this, because we're in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and as we've been talking about break free, we've been talking about the fact that we are all fragile. Every single one of us are fragile. And if you remember, last week I was talking about this understanding of these clay pots and how normally when they're broken or cracked or whatever, we just kind of turn them so that no one sees the brokenness or the cracks or the chips in our life. And that's who we become in life, is we just kind of turn so that nobody sees us too closely or sees what's affecting us. But eventually, those things that we're holding inside of us will come spilling out. Eventually, the things, unless they're dealt with, will be poured out on somebody else, or will have some issue that pops up, just like in a clay pot. And it wasn't that thing that shattered it. It was the fact that it was already weakened by the other blows, that when that thing touched it, it completely crumbled, right? And that's who we are as fragile individuals, and we're trying to deal with these things. So 2 Corinthians chapter 4 talks about it, and I want us to look at it and take it apart this evening. And remember, I'm just going to talk for the time that I have, and then I'll quit, and we'll start back here again next week, because I'm in no hurry to get this over with. I want us to marinate in this. I want us to get to a place to where we can break free. The Bible says, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and Paul's writing here, he says, therefore, since we have this ministry, and remember what we're talking about, the ministry he's talking about here is the gospel ministry. And Paul's been talking about the fact that we have this great opportunity. It's the gospel. The gospel is the good news of Jesus Christ. The gospel is that we couldn't save ourselves, but God sent His only begotten Son that we might be saved because of what He did, not because of what we've done. That He can forgive our fallenness and our sin, and that He can restore us. We have this great ministry. It's the gospel ministry. Now, if you want to see what the therefore is in therefore, you have to look to see what it's there for. And so we're looking at the therefore as he changes the chapter, and he says, therefore, since we have this ministry, we received mercy. As we receive mercy, we do not lose heart. Now, why is that important? That's important because something is going on in the verses before those verses. There's something that Paul is showing us, and I want you to see some of what he's showing without going too deep into it. We'll continue to go into it, but I want you to see what leads to the therefore. Since we have this ministry, this gospel ministry, verse 12 of chapter 3 says this, therefore having such a hope, we use great boldness in our speech, and are not like Moses, who used to put a veil over his face so that the sons of Israel would not look intently at the end of what was fading away. Now watch what verse 14 says. But their minds were hardened. I want you to see that underlined in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. In verse 14, you need to underline that. We're talking about the people that Moses was talking to, and their minds were hardened. You need to see something that is possible for your life. Your life, your mind can become hardened to things. We say things in the sound like this, he's just hard-headed. He's bullheaded, right? There's people I know that if they've made their mind up, that's it. Don't even talk to them. There's no need talking to them. You've probably said that to somebody before, said, ain't no need talking to him. He ain't going to change his mind. Once he make his mind up, that's the way it's going to be, right? Hard-headed. And we get to a place in life sometimes where we think that our ability to be stubborn and to hold our ground and be hard-headed is some kind of strength. Now, sometimes it can be a strength. When you're trying to hold the line on a conviction or you're trying to stand your ground for something good, it can be a strength. But remember what we've learned is any unguarded strength becomes a what? A double weakness. So if we're not careful, what happens to us is we, just like these men and these women, will have a hardened mind. The problem with a hardened mind is this: whatever is in there gets trapped in there. And it's hard to talk somebody out of what they've been thinking about themselves, what they've been through, or how they feel about somebody else. You ever tried to talk somebody into liking somebody that they have already told you they don't like? You ever had somebody you're trying to mend the fences with, and you go, I don't care what you say, I just don't like them. They've got a hardened mind, right? And it's hard to talk to somebody, and you'll say something like this, ain't nobody even talking sense in you, boy, right? Ain't nobody even talk to you, because your mind gets hard. Now, you need to understand that, because what we've been talking about is when we go through things, there's 3 areas of our life that are affected, right? Our mind is about what we lost. Our soul's about who we lost. That's our identity. We'll talk about identity later. Tonight I want to talk about our mind. And then our body is the evidence of what we lost. He goes on to say this, and I want you to see this. This is pretty interesting. He goes on and he says, but their minds were hardened. For until this very day, at the reading of the Old Covenant, the same veil remains unlifted because it is removed in Christ. Now, he's talking about people who were spiritually blind and could not see the miracle of Jesus Christ. And he says, even until this day, they can't see fully the unbelievable nature of who God is. And it's got to be removed by Jesus. Jesus is the only one that can heal and remove the hardness of mind. But to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their hearts. But whenever a person turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now I want you to see the second part, verse 17. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty or freedom. Hear what I'm about to tell you. I'm going to connect some dots. Now y'all going to say, well, you kind of skimmed through that. You didn't talk anything about the people of Corinth, and you didn't talk about what they were veiled from. I want to show you some biblical things that we're learning here. Is this, that your mind through life can become hardened. For them, it was not seeing Jesus Christ as who he was supposed to be, so their heart was veiled. They never come to that understanding of the grace of Jesus Christ because it was veiled from them. They could not see it. But there's something spectacular about the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God has the ability to remove the things that are caught up and hardened our minds and our hearts. There's freedom that comes through Jesus Christ. And the only way we're ever going to experience freedom is in Jesus Christ. And the reason this is so important is because we're seeing generation after generation, people, men and women, boys and girls. I told you, the reason I got into teaching this lesson is because for several years now I've been working with Charlene and with Gina, with different folks in the area of addiction and seeing how people carry addiction for years. And it's very rarely that you meet someone that's just had an addiction for 8 months. They've had it for years. And most of those folks that you end up helping, you go, how long? And they'll say, I've been doing this since I was 15. How old are you? I'm 47. And you go, wow, what? And somehow, some way, you're supposed to sit down and walk them through a program, and all of a sudden, 20-something years of life is supposed to crumble under the weight of a program if they'll just do it every day, and healing will take place. Now, I want you to remember, to tell you, I've seen some fantastic stories of restoration and healing. And I expect to see more. But what I began to see is it wasn't just the program, it was the belief that God can make them better that set them free. Now, what got me into thinking about this in this way that I teach it on Wednesday nights is this. There are people that walk into our church, that walk on our streets, that are our brothers and sisters, that are on the internet, that are carrying things in them and through them that has hardened their mind and their heart. It's all about what they lost, and they can't get away from it. They've not been free from what was done to them in years. Or maybe they've not been free from what they've done in years. It's not just the people who have a problem with heroin or meth or alcohol that need to break free. It's those of us who are breathing in the air of this world, because most of us are broken and carrying something. We carry this stuff, and we have these things, and here's what you'll say. Well, he's mad at me. Why? Because he says every time it gets like this, I just put walls up. You ever wonder where walls come from? People don't know how to build a wall unless they've been behind one. Walls don't just naturally happen. Walls don't just get built emotionally. Walls don't just get built physically. Things trigger the response of building walls. There's something that happens that forces me to push you at arm's length and go, I don't want you any closer than that. Right? And we learn that. We learn to build those walls. We learn to withdraw. We learn to hide. We learn to move away. We learn to do. And so all of a sudden, I've got all this stuff that I've carried with me. It's because my mom and dad got a divorce when I was little, or daddy never loved me, or mama never had time for me, or I was physically abused, or someone spoke to me the way they shouldn't have, or I watched this happen in my mom and dad's marriage, or whatever it is. And we carry this stuff with us. And as we mature, it becomes more solidified in us so that we find ourselves, whether we know it or not, working against something that we've either experienced or we did, as opposed to walking in the freedom of Jesus Christ to order our steps. So, I thought, why not? Let's talk about it. Let's try to break free. Right? Most husbands are not prepared or qualified, listen, to heal their wife. It's why, guys, we say stupid stuff like this. I'll tell you what your problem is, right before she knocks you out. Why? Because men are fixers. Men live in a world where they're constantly, their radar is what's broke and how can I fix it? What's broke and how can I fix it? Right? And all of a sudden they see you, and guess what? You're a project. And it's black and white. And she wants to tell him, this is what I'm experiencing, and this is what happened. And my wife will come in to share something with me. And she begins in the Garden of Eden. And we got to go all the way back to get to where we are. And I have to make sure I've got time for this because it's going to take a while. And she'll say something like this, "You ain't going to believe what happened today." And I say, "Do tell." See, I did learn that. Tell me more. She goes, "Well, it started on Wednesday." And we got to tell the whole story. Now, here's what I say. Let's just get to the card ready. Just tell, would you just tell me who died, what's broke, how much it's going to cost? Just tell me. I don't need the emotional experience, right? Because I just want to fix it, right? And men can have a conversation in all of 2 seconds, right? Good. We're good, right? How was work? Good. How was dinner? Great. What do you want to do? Nothing. He just had a full, I'm telling you, in his brain, that's a paragraph. It's 32,000 words. And you're going to sit in some counselor's office go, "He just never talks to me." And then he's going to come see me and go, "She says I don't talk to her, but I'm telling you, man, I talk to her more than I've talked to anybody in my whole life." And because we carry this stuff. And all of a sudden we sit down and we're trying to heal somebody, we're trying to fix somebody, but the truth of the matter is we're broken. And we've never been set free. And we've got these hard places in our minds. We've got these things that have made us who we are. And we perceive things a certain way. We take things in certain ways. And we smell something or we see something. And that reminds me of just the way that they used to be. And that reminds me, and it takes me. And the only person that can bust that free is Jesus Christ. And he can set us free. So I want us to look at that. And I want to talk about this, what we lose in our mind. What is the loss? What is the thing? Remember, we were talking a few moments ago is restoring to sanity. You have to determine what's causing you to lose your sanity. What is this thing? What is your thing? What is your thing that you're struggling with that's causing you to stay up at night or obsess about it? What is your problem? And for some of us, listen, we're going to need to dig deeper. I'm not talking about what your problem today is. You could probably find something to fuss about today, but it's not today. It's years ago. But the symptom is today. So how do we get to that place where I'm trying to get my sanity, and how can we get God to help me? And was it done to me, or did I do it? Am I carrying guilt for something that I should have done or I didn't do? Am I trying to correct my past by doing something now? There's all these things that we deal with. So here's what he says. Therefore, so seeing how they had minds that were hardened, and seeing how Jesus, the Spirit, has the ability to break us free, or there's liberty in him, there's freedom in Christ. Therefore, since we have this ministry as we've received, we do not lose heart. That's what we were talking about last time. That's the soul. We'll come back to that in a few weeks, which means to give in to fear or lose courage or behave like a coward. But we have renounced, and this is where I finished last week. We have renounced or refused. Renounce means refuse to recognize. We have come to a place where we refuse to recognize. Because, now you need to connect these dots, because of the gospel message, that's the ministry that Paul's talking about. And because of the gospel, because of who Jesus Christ is, and because we know that there's freedom where he is, and because we know he has the ability to soften our minds and break us free from the things that's had us locked up and the walls that we stand behind, because we do not lose heart, we don't act like a coward, because we refuse to recognize. That's what renounce means. Because we have renounced. We refuse to recognize. Recognize what? Okay. Look at what he's talking about here. You ready? We have renounced. Renounce means refuse to. We refuse to recognize the things hidden because of shame. I want to ask you a question. What makes you hide? Anybody in here ever run and hide? Don't testify. We're on Facebook Live. Right. Maybe you don't even want anybody to know you're at church. Things will cause you to hide. We hide from people. You ever been in a supermarket or a place and see somebody and go, whoa, and duck back in an aisle? You ever pull one of them? Oh, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. Right? Most of the time that's just because I'm either because of the way I'm dressed or I don't want to talk or maybe I'm mad. I don't know. But I'll hide. I want you to see this. But we have renounced or refused to recognize the things hidden. Listen, you need to write this down. Shame will cause me to live a life hidden. It will cause me to hide. Let me ask you a question. Do the people that know you the best really know you? You ever gotten to a point in life where you're like, nobody even really knows me? Pastors have to be careful who really knows them. Why? Because, well, you get to really know me. You might decide you don't want me as your pastor, right? We create. We have never faced a moment in time where the ability to stay hidden is easier than today. Now, you may argue and say, Phillip, I don't believe that because we've shrunk the world and everybody's accessible. Everybody is accessible, but you truly don't know what you're looking at when you're even looking at their profile on whatever it is. We have apps that take away wrinkles. We have apps that take away weight. We have apps that add white to your teeth. We have apps that'll make you look like you're old or make you look like you're young. You can be a fraud in an instant in today's world. It's so easy to hide. And realistically, if you think about it, especially today because they sent a lot of people home to work, you really could hide from everybody else. You can order your groceries, you can order your clothes, you can order everything that you want and never see another human being. You'll have it dropped off on your doorstep. You can hide. Let me explain this to you. The enemy wants you to hide. He wants you to isolate and he wants you to withdraw. He wants you to get to a place to where you feel so isolated that nobody really knows who I am. He wants you to get down that rabbit hole so far that you've got self-pity because you feel like nobody's ever taken the time to get to know me. I don't have many friends. I'd be interested to ask on a given Sunday morning, how many wives believe their husbands actually have really good friends? And then I'd like to ask the husbands, how many of y'all have 3 or more really good friends? And you know what you're going to find? Is the majority of men in here would say, I've got people I do stuff with, but I don't really have really close friends. Right? Why is that? When we were growing up, we used to have sleepovers. We go frog gigging together, cow tipping, snipe hunting. What happened? Well, as we grow up and as life happens, we do things get done to us, and we hide. We're afraid to let people close. We're afraid of what people will think about us if they are close. And in fact, sometimes in order to be close to somebody, we have to become somebody that we're not. We become somebody that we're not in our marriages. We become somebody that we're not with our relationships, with our friendships, and we hide the true person that we are. It's exactly why when you get mad at somebody, the first thing that you want to say to them, especially if you feel betrayed, is this: I don't even know who you are anymore. Right? Because the perception of who you were married to or who you were in a relationship with was one thing, and now you feel like they have a whole different understanding. But I want you to see this. There's an understanding that Paul writes. He says, but we have renounced the things hidden. Here's what causes us to hide. You ready? Here's what causes us to hide. What causes us to hide is shame. Now, if you're writing down the word shame, there's two understandings of shame. There's shame for what you've done, and there's shame for what's been done to you. I can have shame because of what I've done, and you can have shame for what's been done to you, and we both experience shame in two different ways. Have you ever embarrassed your children? It's kind of fun. Oh, Dad! Oh, I'm so embarrassed. My daughter's hilarious. You don't know. That's how she acts. You don't know my lifetime. Oh. And that's how I talk to her in public. She hates it. I call my daughter, there's a nickname that I've given my daughter that I'm not going to say because we are live on the internet. And somebody would tell her that I said it out loud. But it's just between me and her. And if I say it out in public, she absolutely is mortified. Right? And it's just funny. And it embarrasses her. That's a certain type of shame. But there's a shame, too, that comes from what you've done. Shame will cause you to hide quicker than anything else. I can't show my face. Do you know what? I felt like everybody in the room was looking at me. Shame means this. It describes a disgraceful, dishonorable deed that produces embarrassment or humiliation. Whether you did it and embarrassed yourself and are humiliated, or whether somebody did it to you and embarrassed you and humiliated you. And there's a vast, wide range of things that can cause shame. It could be betrayal. It could be abuse. It could be maybe your parents were known as something growing up and it has embarrassed you. Maybe it was something that you did and everybody knows you did it and now you're shamed. But shame will cause you to hide. And he says we have got to get to the place to where we don't even recognize the things that are causing us to hide. Now listen to me. Think about this. If something is so powerful that it changes my personality to make me want to run and hide, and he says I'm going to get to the point that I don't even recognize the thing done in shame or that was done to me in shame, listen, we don't have the ability to do that for ourselves. How in the world are you going to choose to not recognize the stuff that you did, that you deserve the shame that goes with it? You know you did it, but somehow you're going to just not recognize it anymore? You can't. It's why sometimes if you think about it, it still hurts you. And how are you going to have had something done to you and see that person's face or hear their name or go to that place and yet somehow not recognize the shame that's associated? Think about how difficult. That's what makes this brokenness so difficult. It's why we pay $125 an hour to talk to somebody and let them help us get through it. We don't have the ability to forget. You don't. And you're never going to have a moment. Remember what I said earlier. When we're trying to restore things, don't wish for things to go back to the way they were. They'll never go back. But we can pray for things to go forward better than they are. Right? So why is that important? Look here. Here's some things that cause shame. I'm going to start to wrap this up tonight. What causes shame? Our own actions, the embarrassment that goes along with it. Think about what bullying is about. You ever had anybody start a rumor about you? Yeah, I'll tell you what the problem with the rumor is not what they're saying, it's that they said it and people believe it. Yeah? I mean, some stuff that gets said, you're like, oh, I'm cool with that. I've been heard worse. But the problem is that we're embarrassed now because there's people that believe it. How am I going to go? They think this about me. They believe this about me. See, that's what shame does. So now all of a sudden, I withdraw because I assume you believe what was said about. I'm embarrassed. So Shame can cause us to do that. Our own actions. You've done something and you are embarrassed by it. You can't believe you did it. And it's called shame. And it's because you feel it, it has directly changed your personality. And there's people telling you need to let it go and you need to get back up and you need to do this, but you can't because you are embarrassed by yourself. You're embarrassed. Causes shame, the feeling of rejection. Rejection can cause the feeling of shame. If I put myself out here and you don't pick it up and assure me, that I feel I should have never sent that text. I'm sorry I even said anything. I'm embarrassed. Now I'm ashamed and I pull back. Right? So sometimes the shame that we're dealing with, now you're going to want to know this because listen to what Paul said, we're going to not recognize the shame. The things that cause us to run and hide, we're not even recognizing that stuff anymore. I'm just telling you, let me say it one more time. The things that cause us to run and hide, we're not going to recognize anymore. Do you know how powerful that sentence is right there? Do you know what would happen to a church if they came to church every Sunday morning and they were determined, the individual were determined to walk back out that door and not be recognized by the stupid stuff that they've done or been done to them? They're going to be set free. That will change your life forever. Huh? You got to recognize. So the feeling of rejection, man, and you know that feeling. Listen, we know how to cause that feeling. One of the greatest tactics that we do to make people feel ashamed of what they've done is to push them aside. They're not invited. We stop talking to them, right? We avoid them. We know, you know the feeling of shame because you've caused it, right? You reject somebody. It's hard. I'm going to tell you something, guys. It's hard to press through and like the person that everybody else is shunning. It really is. I'll tell you, you better be careful. Blah, 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 blah. I like him. You better be careful. I'm telling you right now. I like him. Yeah, but do you know what he did? You know when somebody wants to tell me what somebody else did, you know what I want to do? Let's talk about what you've done first. And once we're done talking about you, then we talk about them. But you're nobody talking about a nobody. Well, what does it matter? Yeah, they did something, but what have you done? You know what I mean? But we do that so that we can shun people. Lack of support will cause shame. This is what leads to the feeling of aloneness or loneliness, the feeling of isolation. I don't feel supported. And ultimately, it leads us to hiding. So how does it affect us? Here's how shame affects us. Shame affects us in these ways. And this is why we have to deal with it. Next week we'll start talking about how we're going to bust free from it, okay? So how does shame affect us? We avoid relationships. That makes sense, doesn't it? Whether it's been done to you or you did it yourself, I'm embarrassed, but I have the feeling of rejection, lack of support, I'm isolated, I begin to avoid relationships. It's why if you've ever been hurt in a relationship, it's so difficult to trust somebody else in a new relationship. It's also why the first thing that happens to us when we're dealt with a brokenness in a relationship is to throw walls up and push somebody away. My soul knows not to run towards pain. So I try to avoid it at all costs. Right? So what we do is when I have shame, whether I caused it or someone caused it in, I begin to avoid relationships. There's certain people I don't want to talk to. I ain't going to, are they going to be there? I'm not going. Right? Hey, I need you to call. I'm not calling them. I avoid things. So shame will cause you to do that. Shame will cause you to find ways out of things because I want to avoid. Number 2 is this. Shame will cause you to suppress emotions. This is extremely dangerous. It's dangerous to avoid relationships. Okay, and we'll talk about some of this in a little more detail. We've got weeks to go through this. I hope you enjoy it. If you don't come back next week, I'll know that you're shameful in avoiding this relationship with your pastor. 'Cause I'll be here. Hey, look here. This is one that's really, you need to see this, guys. Shame, whether you caused it or somebody caused it in you, will cause you to suppress emotions. So I'm walking in shame, so I suppress those emotions, and you will keep thoughts and feelings wrapped up on the inside of you. So what will happen is I have a feeling, a thought, an emotion towards something, but I suppress it. I push it down. I need to move forward. I got to put one foot in front of the other. So I suppress that emotion. I don't let myself be angry. I don't let myself grieve. I don't let myself be hurt. I don't let myself be whatever. I suppress that emotion. Here's the reason that's dangerous, is because any emotion suppressed is eventually going to be expressed. I like the way I said that. I'm a poet and didn't know it. Emotions expressed will be expressed. You thought y'all were just going to have a conversation. Exploded. What are you so mad about? He didn't just get mad. He's been mad. He has been mad and he's been suppressing it. Why are they leaving? Hey, listen, she didn't just decide to leave. She's been suppressing the desire and emotion to leave for years, and this is just what's put, it's going to be expressed. Number next is this. Shame will cause you to feel worthless. It'll cause anxiety and depression. It's why when somebody's either had something done to them or trauma, you ever notice how when someone goes through trauma, let's think about, I hear them talking out there, I got 3 minutes. When someone goes through sudden loss of an individual, have you ever noticed what happens to that person? They may say something like this: I've been in bed for 5 days. Isn't it amazing how your body reacts to certain things? Right? Or you become anxious, or you feeling of worthlessness. We'll take it apart next week. People that feel shame are less likely to take healthy risk. Healthy risks are things that are good for you. Like there may be a job, but you won't take it. Or there may be a new relationship, but you won't enter into it. There may be this, you won't do it because of the shame of what happened. At least where you are right now, you know it, and you can control the outcome. So because you can't control the outcome, you won't take the risk of something new. And that's from shame. I can't fail again. And then I wrote this down. A treatment provider actually had put this. I stole it off the internet. It said people that are dealing with shame are more likely. You need to put this down. This is why we have to deal with it. We're not going to hide. We're going to deal with it. Right? More likely to relapse into problem behaviors. If you're walking in shame, you're more likely. Doesn't mean you will, but you're more likely to. People who are ashamed of their behavior sometimes purposefully continue in the behavior because they don't believe that change or healing is possible. Shame can be the reason people choose not to take steps towards healing. People who live with shame believe they are worthless, so they treat themselves as worthless and engage in behaviors that are unhealthy for them. I thought this was the most powerful line. People who are ashamed of their behavior, sometimes purposefully continue in that behavior. I understand that, and I'm dealing with someone with it makes me understand better. They're not continuing because they want it anymore. They're continuing because they don't think they can get better. That helps me in treating them. I've got to start in the area of what did we just learn? Hope. And it's exactly why Paul said these words. O wretched man that I am, who will set me free from this body of death? Paul knew what it felt like to drag around sin that was killing him from the inside out. And it was going to take something to break him free from it. Get back in here next week and we'll continue to work. This week we're going to be on Sunday morning talking about giving up on Jesus. We're going to talk about when you walk away because Jesus asked too much of you. God, I love you. Thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for the ability to study your word. And God, there's some of us in here, our minds are hardened or calloused around emotions, thoughts, memories, things that we've done and things that have been done to us. And God has called us to run and hide. But God, I pray that you bring about freedom and restore us. Restore our sanity. Restore our marriages. Restore our friendships. Because, God, you